first, let me say I'm delighted to be here, and thank all of you for your kind expressions of sympathy. I guess I'd begin to respond to the question by saying I see two challenges as far as concerns the Judiciary Committee and the members of that committee, and one is very similar to a question that was posed to the last presenter. I think some of the members of the Judiciary Committee, in fact the legislature, are uneasy about being perceived as soft on crime. And that is true despite the fact of posturing as tough on crime has resulted, in my view, has resulted in some criminal justice policy that is short-sighted and counterproductive. I speak specifically about spending $1 billion on prison construction, treating juveniles as adults, mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes policies, a juvenile facility euphemistically called the Connecticut Juvenile Training School, so many other policies that just are so short-sighted. Truth in sentencing, I'll add to that list. The second challenge for members of the committee is probably something common to elected officials and politicians, and that is if you have to explain your position, then you are probably behind on the issue. And the discussion that has taken place here today, the agenda that's been discussed today, makes a great deal of sense to me. And so it's worth the discussion, I would say. And so that I don't sound overly pessimistic about our pursuit and our approach as far as advancing this agenda is concerned, I would say that challenges exist to be overcome. And two of the very positive developments that have occurred within the last few years are organizations that we have worked with, the Judiciary Committee that is, namely the Connecticut Sentencing Commission and the Racial Profiling Prohibition Advisory Board, as well as a number of individuals, including Andrew Clark and Bill Dyson, Justice Borden, Mike Lawler. I think working alongside and in partnership with those individuals, although I believe we've made some progress on this agenda, it hasn't been as fast as I would like it to be. I think many people would probably perceive me as a very liberal legislator on criminal justice concerns. So an organization like the Sentencing Commission, which has a very broad range of individuals as its members, may be a lot more persuasive regarding this agenda than I would personally be. But I envision that there will be some very close working relationship between the Judiciary Committee and some of the individuals and the organizations, the entities that I just mentioned.
A few years ago, I went and I spoke at John Jay University, and I sort of prefaced my remarks with, why would a law and order Republican want to support justice reinvestment? But I believe in redemption. My district has 6 correctional facilities that house over 8,000 inmates. But I sort of also have a global view of the state of Connecticut. We have an aging population. Here we are in the Northeast, unfortunately economically a little bit stagnant, and what we really need is we can't lose any of our young people. And when I say that, we can't lose them to crime. We need to break the cycle of recidivism, especially as it pertains to our youth. I don't need more criminals in the state of Connecticut. I need law-abiding taxpayers. But we have great things that we can trumpet. Let me just read you, I had a bunch of research done, but let me just read you one thing that should make every person in this room feel real good. Did you know, and if it's already been stated earlier today, I apologize, that Connecticut has the highest drop in juvenile commitment rates out of every single state in the United States, 79% from 97 to 2011. I had a lucky opportunity a few weeks ago, actually the first week of December, to go speak at the National Conference of State Legislatures on juvenile justice. It was a panel with myself, a judge from Georgia, and a state representative from Kentucky. And when it came to juvenile justice, we were touted as one of the leading states in the country. And I was very happy to actually hold up for praise the new mayor of New Haven, because I remember when then Senator Harp and I chatted almost 10 years ago talking about young people and how it was just absolutely wrong that we had essentially given up on our 16 and 17-year-olds. That we were one of only about 3 states, I think New York and maybe Louisiana, that had this old-fashioned kind of approach. And maybe it's because my original degrees were in education and I worked 6 summers at a summer camp. I just don't want to give up on young people. Now, granted, sometimes young people can commit horrific acts. That does occur. But I think that there's a commonality when you sort of weed through everything in Hartford, that most legislators want to be tough on those individuals who commit really bad crimes. But the vast majority of folks cycling through our system are going to be back out on the streets in a few short years. And if we can change how they come out into our society to help break the cycle of recidivism, it benefits all of us. I don't need 8,000 inmates in my district. I need law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. And it also, if a person stops committing a crime, the life of crime, it naturally will result in less victimization. Now, I will be brief. I agree with Senator Coleman that there are things that divide us, Republicans, Democrats, different philosophies. But I will say this. I've been lucky enough to be a state senator for 22 years, and I find that when we come together in bipartisan fashion, we can make great things happen. When the majority party puts something on our desk and says, take it or leave it, we end up pushing back. We end up fighting it. And reforms don't happen quickly. And sometimes they're reversed. When we come together, though, such as we did with the juvenile justice reforms that we have successfully enacted, and it's a really great list of positive things that have occurred, and the things that were touted as negatives, costs to municipalities and the like, have not occurred. When we come together and we trust one another across party lines, great things happen. So, in a nutshell, I think there's going to be some problems in the next few years regarding the Sentencing Commission, if for no other reason that it didn't have the birth that it has had in other states. In other states, it was embraced in bipartisan fashion, and unfortunately in Connecticut, Governor REV vetoed it, and the veto was overridden by the majority. So the Sentencing Commission does not have the bipartisan blessing thus far that it has in other states. Nonetheless, though, it has worked wonders regarding a variety of not so controversial measures, getting our laws to be more sensible. And so there's a lot of good that's come out of there. But for the more difficult, controversial proposals, such as trying to comport our laws with recent United States Supreme Court decisions going forward regarding how we treat juveniles and when do we review their sentences and things like that, the Sentencing Commission doesn't have the automatic respectability that it may have in other states. It's not to say it's not going to happen, but there is a little bit of mistrust across party lines. Part of that was from the, for lack of a better term, good time credit policy that has been somewhat pulled back. So there has been some growing pains lately. And from a minority party perspective, maybe my views are different than Senator Coleman's. But I think there's just too much out there where we can form common grounds to give up the momentum that we've established, especially regarding young people. We have so much that we can build on, and there's some great ideas out there that we can use from other states. For example, I know there's been efforts, I salute former Representative Dyson, Andrew Clark, in getting that documentation for folks coming out of prison that would allow them to get jobs. And sometimes in other states, there's incentives for businesses to reach out to those coming out of corrections, whether it's in terms of insuring them, whether it's in terms of tax credits. It's difficult in this economy to win over public support for some of these things, because the obvious question is, well, why are you folks bending over backwards for someone who's a convicted felon coming out of prison when I've been out there looking for 6 months and I can't find a job? That's a legitimate question. But in the long run, if people's histories are not that bad, to the extent we can help people get themselves back into the workforce and become successful, productive individuals, that's a good thing. And so the programs that we've set up for juveniles, to a great degree, they can be replicated. There are some basic nuts and bolts things that I hear from my corrections officers and those inside our institutions regarding lack of funding for new classes of counselors and teachers in our facilities. It's not glamorous, but these are the things that we have to make sure are in place to maintain our success. So I think there's plenty of ground where we can reach across party lines, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bed of roses. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dyson, and thank you, Andrew, in Central Connecticut, for hosting this, and for everybody that came here today. This has been a very interesting conference to provide us with the information that we need on what we are doing. Representative Dyson, you challenged us. What are we going to do for the up and coming year, and where are we coming from? I think everybody heard. Where do we need to go? Part of the reason, and Senator Kissel talked about juvenile justice reform, and it was because all the appropriate things were in place when we started it. We had we had justice reinvestment going on. We had collaboration going on. We also had the ability to look at and analyze the data that Washington Institute of Public Policy had presented to us about what programs worked. And what we did was we looked at the dollars, because before we couldn't get people to really do it because it was a good thing, but we had to figure out how to get people to be motivated. So we looked at the dollars, we looked at the foundations, we looked at the programs that worked, and we put money into those. We looked at juvenile probation, we expanded the number of probation officers. Thanks to Court-Supported Service Division under our good friend, Mr. Carbone, he had his team out there working on all of the things that we went out and looked at. How do we expand that this coming year? Well, we can't forget the dollars, because sometimes we can't get everybody to listen. So one thing that I think you heard earlier is that Connecticut is now a participant in a Results First program. We are in collaboration with the Pew Foundation in the Appropriations Committee, and we are looking at how many dollars we are actually spending for everything out there, and what programs are out there. How are they actual, what are the outcomes, and what is the cost of those outcomes? Because one of the things that we did in juvenile justice reform was we figured out if we reduce the number of kids going into prison, we took a number and said, how much money was that representing? And I never forgot this, because what we did was we calculated that we had $10 million if we diverted these children out of the system. In 1 year, $10 million. And what we did was we took that $10 million and we put it on the front end. And it was that $10 million that Court-Supported Services Division and the Judiciary Committee and Department of Children and Families and Department of Social Services and State Department of Education, we were actually able to put programs out there to try and address it. And we have to continue to do that. You know, it's a sad thing. In my day, when I was growing up, we had children's programs. We had youth centers, we had things for us to do. And it was after school was something that was always invested in. And if you look at this past few years, we have reduced that dramatically, where our children have nowhere to go. And then we wonder why they get in trouble. So what we had to do, we couldn't put money back in the budget for after school. But we created a title which is very sad to say about where we are. We created a program funding called Youth Violence Prevention, which really was no more than community services providing to our children that we had done in the past. So times have changed, but we still have to understand that it is what we do, which is support our families to make them positive, to make them successful. Connecticut Business Industry Association said the most important thing that the General Assembly could focus on is creating jobs for people, especially people coming out of incarceration. If we spend a little time just talking to people who are re-entering the society, the biggest obstacle they have is employment. It is something that we don't seem to quite understand, because when you come out of prison, you still have that stigma because you've been in prison, and you have to put that on your employment records. And we have very single-handedly reduced the number of actual jobs that will pay for them, that will create a living wage, because we have branded them. Unlike Germany, I listened to Germany, and I think all of us, we all wish we could go to Germany, because it's a much kinder system. It's rehabilitation, and we've got to go back to rehabilitation. So as far as what I think we need to do and what I think we should focus on is validating, taking the dollars out of incarceration. We've reduced our schools, we have reduced our schools too, but we've reduced our prisons by 3,000. If you take that number, 3,000, and assume that we have it costs about $40,000 an inmate to support in a year, that's about $12 million. So we take that $12 million and we reinvest it back into our cities and our communities and our towns, and make sure that we provide the job training. And we focus on the sentence reduction that the Sentence Commission has worked on. And we change the amount of time that a person has to be incarcerated, because many people that you talk to that are in prison, it's because they had no other choice. Their backs were up against the wall. And I'm glad somebody asked, what was the color makeup of the population in Germany in the prisons? I think we all heard that. It was very low. Our society has used prisons in a lot of ways that I don't think I need to talk about here. But it's really important that we try and change that direction. Education, jobs, and community activities are something that we have to put back in our communities right now, so that we stop the erosion of families and they stop the continuing, I call it the march into prison that a lot of our children are suffering with now. So that's what I think we need to do.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to see all of you out here, and to see so many people who are really not the usual suspects and the people that deal with this every day, but the people that have an interest in this overall issue. So I'm really happy that you're here. I too want to say that I'm very proud of Connecticut and where we've gone in juvenile justice. And I know that he is retired, and I'm going to just tell a secret on one of our former state employees. He did what he shouldn't have done. He lobbied the legislature, and he told us what he needed in order to move the ball down the road, and that was Bill Carbone. So let's give Bill Carbone a hand. And so he was a champion. As you've heard, Toni Walker has been a champion for Raise the Age. Senator Kissel has been a champion, and he's had to actually put on a mask sometimes, because he has to talk to people who maybe don't see things the way that he does, who are the people that are in his caucus. And so he has to figure out a way to talk to them. But in his own way, he has been a champion. And Senator Coleman has been a champion. Raise the Age would not have been passed if there weren't hundreds of people out there who were champions. If we're going to move this agenda and have people re-enter our society and stay and become contributing members of our various communities, then we're going to need champions. And yes, we're going to need to support programming, and I think that is important. And we're going to need you to talk about the choices that we've made. If we were a jurisdiction as a state, we would be the 6th wealthiest jurisdiction in the world. The 6th wealthiest jurisdiction in the world. So money is not a real issue to us, if you think about it. And when you think about where we've spent our money, since I was in the General Assembly for 21 years, we've spent our money in building prisons. And for some people, frankly, it was a jobs program. It was a jobs program for a certain set of folks, but not for the people in our urban areas. And so what happens is that it was a building program, and we know that that builds jobs. It was a jobs program because you need those jobs to actually keep the prisons going. But the reality is, by making that choice, and I see it now vividly, I wish I'd seen it before I decided to run for mayor, but what we decided not to do in our state, and I think that it has created the economic stalemate that we have in our state, because we decided to invest in prisons, we didn't invest in housing. And so we don't have the kind of housing that would draw an employer here that is entry level. Think about how much it costs to live in Connecticut. And think about an employer that has a lot of entry level employees. Will they come here? Not likely. So that by not having a strong housing program, we've created a void. But we find ways to keep this prison system going. Because we haven't invested in transportation, and I've got about 20 bridges in my town that need to be fixed, but there aren't the resources to fix them because our economy is stagnant. But we've invested over here. We've made a conscious decision to do that. Because we haven't invested adequately, frankly, in urban education, then we actually get to fill those jails that we made the choice to invest in. We haven't invested in it, and no state has, so I can't really just blame us, and we've probably done more, frankly, than most states in investing in behavioral health care. But the reality is, for those of you who drink coffee and actually eat sweets, you probably have an understanding of what an addiction is. Now think about that times 100. And we are incarcerating people because they have an addiction that is a physical addiction, and they're even less able to address it than we are, our sugar or our coffee. There is something wrong with that, but that's how we have chosen to invest our money and where we want to put our money. I would suggest to you that that's not going to change overnight, but the reality is we've got to get champions in place to help us see that the investment choices that we did make as one of the wealthiest jurisdictions in the world was one that actually doesn't contribute to our growth, that actually contributes to our decline, one in which we have children, young people, young adults, who we make it even harder for them to take care of themselves and their families. A system in which, and now as mayor, I get calls at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning because somebody's young adult has been murdered. I get those calls now. And I have young people who make decisions around what they're going to do with their lives because they think their life is going to last until they're 25. You don't want to have a series of males in particular thinking that their lifespan is 25 and making decisions based upon that. But that's what we have because of choices that we made decades ago. I think that we've got to find ways to rethink those choices. We've got to find new champions to come forward and say there are better ways to do that. And we're not going to be Europe, but, we've got to find ways, frankly, to take the guns out of our children's hands. And I know that we are a gun culture, but we've got to find ways to do that. And so I would suggest a couple of things. We've got to invest in our urban areas. And not just because I'm the mayor of New Haven, but I went to Bridgeport yesterday. And, you know, the reality is that you can look, not so much at New Haven because we look like we're thriving until you come to some of our neighborhoods. But the reality is when you look at downtown Bridgeport, you know that it is an orphan child in this state. We've got to do something about that. And the people there are suffering because we haven't. We've got to do something about Hartford. Now, when Representative Walker and I were on appropriations and Bill Dyson, we did a little bit. But, you know, this has got to be a cry from all of the state. If we're going to move Connecticut forward, we can't have our major towns as depressed as they are. I have right now probably 11, 12% unemployment rate in New Haven. But in my neighborhoods that are the biggest senders to the prison system, it's over 20%. It's over 20%. How can you, in this economy, not be able to feed yourself and your family because you don't work and not go into crime? You can't. And we need help in our cities. And so I'm going to be arguing that we have made choices. They have been bad ones, not just for our cities, but for the state. And that there are different choices that we need to make. And that there are different champions that we need to make. And that you're sitting in this room. And that if we do it together, we never thought that we would make 16 and 17-year-olds children again. But we did, and we went from the back of the pack to the top of the pack in the way we treat our children in this state. If we can do that, and we thought it was impossible, then we can take care of this system that we've invested in that actually leads, I believe, to our economic decline.
For a long time, I've recognized a correlation, very real correlation between criminal activity and the lack of employment opportunity and in fact, in general, the deprivation of opportunity in certain committees. And in many respects, my involvement in this day's activity, this event, has reinforced my belief that we need to do something dramatically about certain communities, as Mayor Harp has indicated. I've always believed that criminal justice involves a two-pronged approach. Yes, we certainly need to enforce the law, and public safety ought to be a paramount concern, but we most definitely need to improve the plight of certain individuals. And I think mainly that would have to involve most definitely improving the quality of the educational systems in many of our communities, and in fact improving the employability prospects of residents of those communities. Over the last few sessions of the legislature, we've taken some steps which I think move us in the right direction. And just a peek at your agenda for today indicated to me that you had an opportunity to hear from Kennard Ray and all of the issues surrounding ban the box and related issues that have to do with the certificates of rehabilitation and provisional pardons, all of which I think are steps in the direction of providing meaningful employment opportunities for individuals who have come out of our correctional system. We need to be concerned very definitely about the school to prison pipeline, and I think if we do things about improving employment prospects, like most certainly involving inmates in some lifestyle training before they're released, doing some things, Representative Walker mentioned a bill prevention of youth violence, part of which sought to refer juveniles at risk to certain services and programs in the community. Another component of that bill sought to use some of the dollars that we utilize in state projects, bonding projects and the like, and setting aside or making a provision to require that a certain percentage of the people who are employed on construction projects, for example, be hired from the community where the construction project is taking place. So that in New Haven or Hartford or Bridgeport, if those kind of projects are progressing, that bill that Representative Walker referred to requires that I think as many as 30% of the individuals who work on that job be from the community where the job is. In my district, we have the Metropolitan District Commission, which is engaging in a $2 billion clean water project. It's changing sanitary sewers, separating sanitary sewers from stormwater sewers. And again, that's a very, I think, expensive construction project. So there is a set-aside provision in that bill for specifically ex-offenders and for residents of the communities that are affected, most affected and most inconvenienced by that particular project. So those are just some of the things that I think that we've taken steps in the right direction. And maybe the Sentencing Commission was involved in this, but there was a survey within the last couple of years regarding those state statutes which unnecessarily create barriers for occupational licenses. Many ex-offenders were excluded from things like becoming barbers because of their criminal background. And there was a survey of those kinds of statutes that were done, and there was some correction to those kinds of statutes which would hopefully provide expanded opportunities for individuals coming out of our correction system.
I think one of the most important things that we do going forward right now is access to training and access to certification programs, because many people right now, when we talk to businesses, especially through the investments that DECD and some of the other, and the governor has done, we talk to the business community that comes into Connecticut and they say, well, we're going to bring our own workforce because you don't have the skilled workforce that we want here in Connecticut. Well, I think we need to start to reinvest those dollars into training people in the communities. We have community colleges here that I'm sure people don't, you know, they watch, but they don't understand. But many of our community colleges are having their budgets reduced dramatically right now. It was something that was a reform that was presented about merging the state universities and the community colleges together. Unfortunately, the community colleges are who serve our communities and provide them with that second level that is important for them to get the jobs. We need, in New Haven, we have Gateway Community College. Gateway Community College gets about 1,400 students that apply every year because they need higher learning, higher training. Of that 14,000 that apply, 83 are the only ones that come in at grade. Did you hear that? So therefore, we need to make sure that we invest in our community colleges and we maintain them, because the people coming out of prison, number one, they probably go and get a GED at where I work, or they get a high school completion, but they don't usually go to college, but they do need to get some additional training in order for them to get a job. So we need to make sure that we provide credit, certificate programs or any type of higher training in there out for our kids or our adults that are coming out of the correctional system.
You know, you send 25,000 people to my front door, I'm definitely going to be paying attention. There's no two ways about that. And in fact, there are many times when the legislative office building does get flooded with people on different points of every issue. And I also want to thank Mayor Harp for her kind words previously when she responded to the questions. And we all have been champions on raise the age issues and other ones. And I hope I didn't neglect Representative Walker for all the incredible work that she did. I guess probably the only person we forgot is Christine Keller. Judge Keller did an awful lot of changing all our laws too. Now, my first job was picking tobacco at 14. As I drive through the towns that I represent, it's a subdivision now, all those fields. It would be nice if those jobs were back, but you're right. We are living in a very fast-paced, changing economy. I almost look at it as, you know, we had 150 years ago the Industrial Revolution. Basically, people were used to an agrarian society, and then all of a sudden, in space of a few decades, the world was completely different. And there were winners and there were losers. Well, we're in a fast-paced, changing world right now. And unfortunately, I'm seeing pretty decent paying jobs that are full-time now getting reduced, and it's almost like people have to work two part-time jobs. And to be honest, my wife has 2 part-time jobs, I have 2 part-time jobs, and hopefully we cobble together something that's close to a whole. But that seems to be where things are going. Now, to what Representative Walker had indicated about our community colleges, up in my neck of the woods, and I have Enfield, Summers, Suffield, Windsor, Windsor-Locks, East Granby, and Granby, we have a Snuntuck Community College. It's being replicated at program manufacturing technology is being replicated in at least 3 other community colleges, and we hope to see it even grow even further. That is a low-cost program. They are willing to take anyone from 17 to 90. And within the space of less than a couple of years, these people have great skill sets, and they make $50,000, $60,000 a year in the beginning, and manufacturers are looking for them. So these programs are out there, but maybe we're not doing enough to try to promote them. There are opportunities for entry-level jobs, at least in my neck of the woods. We have Walgreens distribution around Bradley International Airport. We are on track to get Amazon around Bradley International Airport. We have actually utilized the 4 towns around Bradley International Airport for entry-level style jobs so that we can promote growth and sort of use that area of our state as an incubator, as leverage. Can we replicate some of these things in our urban areas? Absolutely. But you touched something, 2 things, and then I'll stop. Sadly, the world of 1957 does not exist. There were so many institutional supports for young people that have vanished. The organizations, the things that kids could go to, the networks of support just aren't there. So if you have good young people that want to walk the straight and narrow, they're going around their neighborhoods and they're not seeing what was around there just 30, 40 years ago. The other thing is you want to see changes in our schools. That's really hard to come by. I'm not saying we're not making those changes. I know that the Education Committee, Higher Education Committee are striving to try to change curricula. But Connecticut is the land of steady habits. You have a whole thousands and thousands of dedicated teachers, but they know what they know, and it's hard to bring in new things, new technology. I see it moving in that direction, but it's not anything that's going to happen overnight, whether 25,000 people are on our front steps or not. So we are in a process of trying to change our education system, I think teachers have done a fabulous job given the changes in our society, but we are now looking at ways to try to evaluate their performance, even after we've put so many societal things on their plate above and beyond what they teach. That being said, there's this whole core curricula issue. Some people are very suspicious about it, and it goes all the way down to what's being taught, not how it's being taught, and that's a whole debate that's probably going to gear up, and I've heard people starting to talk about it on radio and in neighborhoods, and so that's starting to happen too. But we are in a transitional period, and it's scary, and it's difficult for everyone, let alone folks coming out of prison. But I think that there are jobs out there. We need to sort of communicate where are the jobs, what's the education requirement, and how can we link up the people that want those entry-level jobs. But I have spoken to a lot of employers, and if they have people with good work habits, they will help them to learn the skill sets that they need to be successful. So there's a lot of great potential out there.
I'm just going to tell you a little secret. You don't need 25,000 people. if you get 100 people to call or write, trust me, your council person, your mayor, your state rep, your state senator will pay attention. Because in spite of what you think, we often on an issue don't get that many people who actually are concerned about it. So it doesn't take a lot of people to do that. So that's one. The other thing is that in terms of education, I think it is the curriculum, and actually it's often not the teachers that make a decision about what the curriculum is. And you know, you have been sitting here listening to evidence-based programming, results first, and we don't really hold our curriculums up to that kind of scrutiny. And one of the things that I think that people need to be doing is to say, you're using a curriculum, what is the result? What is the outcome? And we haven't been doing that. We live in a knowledge-based economy. If you don't do that, and if somebody isn't in charge of curriculum that knows what they're doing, then you're going to get what you always got. And I really believe that it's a little higher in the food chain where those kinds of decisions are made, but they're very important decisions.
We had been talking about results first for a while, and our governor went to, I think, the governor's big meeting somewhere in some state, and one of the states was talking, one of the governors or speakers was talking about results first and how remarkable it does to help states craft their fiscal investments in good programs that work and actually directing it. And they touted the fact that Connecticut was one of the ones that do it, and the governor said, yes, we are. So the governor's staff, Undersecretary Lawler, Secretary Barnes, and the Office of Fiscal Analysis, and the appropriations are all working right now to set those standards so that we can use that to evaluate. And I guess for everybody's information, when we did the Raise the Age, we used what I told you was the Washington Institute of Public Policy's standards. And what they did was they evaluated different types of interventions that you use with juveniles, and they gave them a dollar amount. And what that did was it gave us an opportunity to see what things work and what didn't. And one of the top things was juvenile probation officers, making sure that you have smaller numbers. One of the worst ones in return on investment were boot camps. And so what it did was it helped us stop going into these you know, so, and when we, and Mayor Harp talked about evidence-based practices. There's a fallacy in that, because if you aren't talking and measuring the same type of population when you say that you want to adopt this practice, it's not evidence-based, because we had one was multisystemic therapy that seemed to work in Colorado and North Carolina in all aspects. But if you have a Spanish community and you have no one that speaks Spanish in that group of delivery of services, then it's not going to work. It may be evidence-based in North Carolina or Colorado, but it won't work in Hartford, Connecticut. So that is something that we are doing this year, and I hope to start to get more of a conversation. We are going to have a few more meetings about it, and we will roll it out probably in the end of February. So I hope that's your best answer.
Thank you very much. I think probably our last question here. Stand up.
Okay.
Please.
It's a long day.
DOC, they can create jobs by linking up with firms and companies and making jobs in the prison. Why the state can't create a job on the outside where they can come from jail? It's just like they're inside working for the companies in the prison and then be released. You understand what I'm saying?
Anyone care to respond to the question?
Well, I don't know if Connecticut still have it, but you know, different states in the inside, they be working for you know, companies linking up with the prison, and you know, they be got their own business.
I think I know what you're talking about. Some time ago, I don't know to what degree it still exists now, Pat, that there was one program you had with Aetna or something with some microfiching stuff. Yeah, they got, but it only deals with a small number of people.
It's like it's a state job. You do income taxes or POT. The hours working is that's a good job. It's like keep on.
But it's not that many of those jobs. Okay. So that means you still have this large population of people without jobs. Okay, so you're really talking about, you do the small number anyhow. You build upon that. But that's what he's making reference to.
They talk about the training. I'm saying they can still get training, but they still got that stint over their head, the record. So they can like build a rapport up, working, like say if you guys got your own business, they can build a rapport up there and use that, then go get a job for somewhere else.
Okay.
Because you're
Can
just
I-
releasing them straight to the streets.
Yeah. Let me just chime in a little bit, because I'm with my corrections facilities, I'm sort of familiar, and it can be complicated. For example, in some of my facilities, they wanted to have automotive, and yet we're sort of faced with the fact that it's the same car over and over and over, because if you then say, let's expand this and bring in other cars, you get calls from the automobile places, the garages, the tow truck operators in the neighborhood saying, you're taking business away from us. Don't take away from our business. I've had that happen with printing. We've had some excellent equipment in our corrections facilities where people learn high-tech printing. But God forbid, and I understand the people outside, that you start competing with their contracts, they're going to say, the state has an unfair advantage with its labor force to undercut our prices, so you can't be competing with us when it comes to printing. So it's a fine line as far as training folks on the inside. But now I hear you want folks to sort of, you know, we have halfway house beds, we have, you know, drug counseling and things like that. What I'm hearing from you is, how about some kind of sort of, you know, halfway measure with employment? And I think that's a great idea. What you need is businesses willing to reach out and take someone and employ them maybe on a temporary basis to see how they go, to build up their resume, to show that they have a track record. And how do you incent businesses to make that investment? And as I said, I think there's some states out there in the Midwest, I think, I want to say either Nebraska or Kansas, and maybe we can have some of our study folks check into that, but they either use insurance or tax incentives or a combination of both. And when I say insurance, sometimes it's as simple as, what if this person goes awry in our business? We need to be able to recover from that. And so part of the trust, the outreach of trust by the business is, well, if we do this, we're covered if it blows up in our face. And so I like your idea of sort of like easing into the job system, the employment system, by getting sort of a help to learn skills, but also what I'm hearing is build up that trust and confidence. And if we can get some pilot programs like that up and running, I think there's a great chance of success. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that it's fair to other folks out there in a difficult economy.